Hello there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. Today, we're going to talk about music. So, this is our monthly show, a little bit different if you're on TikTok Weekly and you've been in before. The monthly show, we talk to two creative people about what it's like to create in a particular field and where they got that creativity in their life and such. Yeah, we use that word a lot around here, create. And so today, let me just get started right away with Amy and Greg. So, Amy, let's talk with you first. Let's introduce you here. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for asking.
And Greg, how are you doing today?
I am not unwell, thank you.
That is excellent. So, how we're going to get started with this? Amy, I'm going to ask you our first question. Greg, you're just going to jump in as you want to later on. And Amy, first, tell us what first got you thinking about being creative, or what got you interested in being creative? Was it something you did as a kid, playing in the mud? Was it where did you go? How did you start building your life?
I did play in the mud a lot. I think it's probably mostly my family. I have a pretty musical family, and I think my aunts and uncles sort of attached themselves to music as children themselves. And so I was surrounded with cousins who were playing instruments, and it was just sort of a thing. They would hand you an instrument and go, okay, go nuts. And my mom pretty much only listened to classical music. So I grew up listening to a lot of like arias and that sort of a thing. So it's just, being surrounded by it. And then I was interested in it from that aspect as far as music goes. Yeah.
What kind of instruments did they give you?
I have a violin, and that's like we mostly do stringed instruments, but after picking up violin and getting pretty good at that, I have picked up a couple of other random instruments. Like I have a tiny ukulele back here and a mandolin and some penny whistles, and I have a kalimba now, which is like a thumb piano.
Hmm.
And a music box, because music box you can sort of program like you can a computer, and that's been a really interesting mesh of my professional life, which is as a software developer, and my personal creativity.
Greg, how do you mash up your digital stuff with your music and everything? Because I know you do a lot of digital work.
Oh, was that for me?
That's for you, yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear who you were talking to. Sorry. I just assumed you wanted to talk to the creative person and not me. So,
Nah.
so, wow, I don't know. Let's see. I mean, just ask your question again, since I
So
missed the
wait,
context.
as you're growing up and being creative, how did you get learning how you just started flexing your creative muscles? And then Amy had just brought up being merging her digital and music stuff together, and I know you do a lot of both of those
Yeah.
too in your life.
I mean, as far as creativity or as creative, I mean, I think the best way I could describe it is I just never stopped being a child. I mean, literally. I mean, that's it. When you're a kid, everything you do is creative. I don't know, just by default, right? And I just never really stopped doing that. It's, you pick up an object, be like, oh, look, this is a spaceship, or whatever, and then your neighbors look at you like you're insane, and you just say, I'm just still a kid, so don't just ignore me. And then that's all there is to it.
All
But,
the best people are crazy around here.
well, yeah, you kind of got to be. Life's too short. I think that's really what it is. Life's too short to not have fun, and it's just more fun to like play with stuff than it is to be serious all the time. So,
What kind of instruments do you play?
My professionally now I'm a piano player, a pianist, a vocalist, and a keyboard player, and also bass guitar is another instrument that I do. So, but I play 16 instruments. I just kind of switched around. I tell people I got bored a lot, so I learned an instrument. Like, okay, I can play that reasonably well. Let me try this. And the one instrument, and I have to say, I very much admire people who can play the clarinet. Okay, because I played the saxophone for 5 years semi-professionally. I can play every saxophone, every woodwind instrument. I played the bassoon, and I even played a little bit on an oboe. But for some reason that I've never figured out, I cannot get anything other than an annoying squeal out of a clarinet. I cannot get a tone out of a clarinet to save my life, even though it's the same woodwind mechanism, the reed and the mouthpiece. I don't know what it is. I cannot get a sound out of a clarinet. It's embarrassing, but it's true. That is like my nemesis. Never was able to get it.
Well, everybody needs a nemesis.
I suppose so.
And so all these
boring nemesis, but
so what kind of band are all of these instruments in now?
Oh, I don't play a lot of them professionally anymore. I mean, I just collect them. They just like sitting in the studio. Like I have the studio in Fort Lauderdale, recording studio, and so I have piles of instruments in there all around the wall and stuff. So it's like, oh, I need a trombone for something. There's the trombone, or I need a saxophone. I got the saxophone, or a flute, or whatever. And so I did that. But yeah, as far as playing out, pretty much these days, it's pretty much piano, vocals, bass are the three that I do, kind of playing out publicly, if you will.
And so when you're playing publicly, since I don't even know if I mentioned this to Amy before she came in, tell everybody, Greg, what band you're actually in and what you do.
We have a touring show called Across the Universe, and it's all the music of the Beatles. So it's from the early years through the end of their careers, and then into the solo careers and stuff like that. So we do a lot of that music, and just kind of, a lot of theater shows. Really, it's not like a bar band per se. It's more of a theatrical show, and we've been doing that 10 years now. So
Wow,
nice.
Yeah, it pays well. So
that's cool.
it's always good when you can do something and actually get paid decently for it. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever?
What are the chances for you, Amy? Yeah, tell us about that. You go.
Oh, I was going to ask Greg if you ever struggle with that as like. So I've seen professional musicians who perhaps come up in like a more creativity driven thing, and then find out that it's really easier to make money doing something that's like the same thing over and over again and less creative. I mean, I'm sure there's creativity in like playing the Beatles music and sort of adding your own flair to it, but that's sort of what I'm wondering is like, because the two cellos guys where they're like, oh, we play all this classical music and we're really great at classical, but no one wants to listen to classical supposedly.
Right.
So they just electrify their cellos and then play something really fast and loud, and everyone's like, oh my god, that's the best thing ever. And that always really disheartens me, because I'm like, but there's all this other stuff out here that a cello can do.
I'll share something. I got my degree in music. I went to Berklee College of Music up in Boston. So I got my degree in music production and engineering, which is basically studio technology. So before I was professional in the music field, or simultaneously, I was also a programmer. So I, wrote code, and I did all kinds of boring software stuff and some fun stuff and little this, little that. And then of course in the studio, it's like computers and music and just kind of mash them together, and it's all technology. So I was always right at home, and so I did the studio thing. But one of the professors up there, and he had been in the industry for 40 years. His name was Wayne Wadhams, and sadly passed away. He was a mentor of mine. And he used to say, he had all these really great phrases that you would love, I'm sure. But one of the phrases he used to say a lot is like, just remember, you can, sure, you can polish a turd, but in the end, you only have a really shiny turd. It was one of his phrases, right? So he had all these very strange phrases. But one of the things that always stuck with me, he says, look, there's a reason it's called the music business. If you want to make a living, then you treat it like a business. If you want to be artistic, well, hang out in mom and dad's basement and do all the creative art you want. But understand that if you want to get paid, there's another aspect to it. So you have to kind of find a way to balance those two, and I was always good with that because I like money, let's be honest. So I was always cool, doing the business. And so like you mentioned with the Beatles show, like I kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't know how much creativity is. We literally do note for note and every small subtle detail to the original recordings as much as humanly possible. Like we will argue and say, no, you shouldn't do a little slide up to that fret. It's a hammer-on. You got to don't forget that next time. And the guys will pick things apart, but that's kind of the angle that we went with. We want to try to capture the sounds of the original recordings in a live setting as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And which is often interesting because when you think about it, the Beatles themselves only played live for like 4 years, and then they just said, we're done with this, we're not doing this anymore, it's a headache. So like 60% of the stuff that we play, the Beatles themselves never performed live, and we're trying to figure out how to take this studio record and do it live, right? So I guess from a creative, you want to talk about creativity, there's your creativity. How are we going to take 60 things and kind of condense it down and make it sound the same with 4 people in a live setting, But So I've always looked at, if I have the desire to do something creatively, I'll just do it, and then like, all right, I'm going to do this now. And maybe everyone will hate it. And, oh, well, I don't care. I just did it because I felt like doing it. And then it's like, okay, time to go to work now. I'm going to do this because they're going to pay me to do this. And I'm totally cool with that, because if I ever feel like, wow, this isn't very creative, I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm getting paid a lot of money right now to do this. And that makes me happy. So I can buy the toys to do the creative stuff with the money they pay me. So I'm totally cool with it. I have no
Amy?
problem kind of straddling those two worlds.
What about you, Amy, for being professional in music, making it as
Um,
a business?
I have not made it a business. So I have what people might refer to as like a real job. I mean, your Beatles thing is a real job, obviously.
Oh, that's only a
But like,
part-time thing. That's
oh,
only
okay.
on the side. That's the extra cash. My real job is like studio stuff.
So that's your
But
real
that's still
job.
related.
But I have like the opposite. So I write software most of the time as my money making job, but it's not really like my passion. Like I don't go and continue coding when I'm done. But I've never quite figured out how to monetize music in a way that still makes me happy and doesn't make it feel like less of a hobby for me. I think for me, my music making is more like for me rather than for other people. And it is hard for me to figure out things that are commercializable from that aspect. And I've never really tried to like go that direction. But then the other problem is that my job takes up more of my time and I don't have as much time to spend on trying to make something of a commercial product out of my music. So I haven't figured it out yet. I mostly just dink around and then throw stuff at walls.
That's what you do. It's spaghetti theory. You throw it at the
Mhm.
wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it wrong. I mean, that's basically what everybody does. That I forget. I'm going to throw another quote that I remember. I have all these quotes in my head that just I'll read it or I'll hear it from someone and it will just stick and be like, yeah, that's brilliant, and it will stick there, and then I'll totally forget who said it. But another one, it was like, look, make stuff that you like, make stuff that you want to listen to, make stuff that you want to watch. And if you like it, someone out on the planet is going to like it, and that's your audience. So don't worry about who's going to like it. Just make stuff that you like, because you're not the only person on the planet that's going to like something.
Yeah.
So I always remember that. And it's like, just be you, do you, and the audience will follow. They'll find you, I guess.
I think one of the hard parts is actually believing that that's true, because
Sure.
it's really hard to go and compare yourself to people who are maybe not like making tons of money, but like making a space for themselves in the music industry, and like trying not to make yourself that person, because just because that person has their own niche does not mean that that is the only niche and that you
Right.
can't also find one. So that's another hard
Yeah.
part.
Yeah,
It's just like
I listen to
believing that.
bands that just have pure acoustics, no drums even. So yeah, there's a niche out
Something
there
for
for you.
everybody.
See,
You're
I
gonna
am a
find
big
that one.
fan of the one-hit wonder bands, the bands that have that one hit and made like millions of dollars and you've never heard from them again. And everyone's like, oh man, that's so tragic, so sad. It must be so depressing. Like, are you kidding? If I had one song that was a major hit, I will play that one song for the rest of my life and nothing else if they keep sending me royalty checks. I'm totally fine with that.
So this sounds like you have a new
stuff.
band idea of you're going to create a new band and just play one-hit wonders. Like here's these 7 different one-hit wonders, and we're just going to put this together in
I
a
would
band.
totally do that.
Well, yeah.
If someone wants to write me the check, I will do that. I will set it up. I'll play it. No problem. I
And
have
it
no
would fund all
problem.
your other creativity endeavors.
Exactly.
And
That's it. You have to make a
right
living.
there, Amy's gets a great point there. I want that one of my other questions I always ask our guests. What else are you doing creative? And in the pre-show, we found out both of you are on Ravelry. Both of you are doing knitting projects.
Made
So
my sweater.
tell me about this.
I promise,
Yeah.
Amy, this is going to be more interesting.
Well, what? I don't know. How did you get into knitting, Greg?
Okay, so quite literally, when my Italian grandmother on my mother's side, I specify because you don't know that, but I'm mostly Italian, some other stuff in there. But so when I always talk about my family, I'm always referring to the Italian family. My cousins are all in Italy, in Ivrea, and in the Piemonte in northern Italy. Anyway, my grandmother, she just had this box of knitting stuff, and after she passed away, my brothers and I were tasked to go and kind of purge out and clean the house out so they could put it up for sale. And quite literally, they were like, "Oh man, look, there's a whole box of like knitting needles, just like a pile of like knitting needles." And I'm looking at it thinking, well, I know they're not going to take them. Screw it, I'm going to learn how to knit. So I literally took them and taught myself how to knit, because why not? They were there in front of me, and that's it. And I immediately said, okay, I can do this stitch, I can do this stitch. I'm going to make a sweater. And so I went and got some yarn and I made a sweater, and then I brought it into the local yarn shop. He's like, "Oh, wow, we'd love to see it when it's done. You know, you're a new knitter. Maybe we can." I'm like, "Yeah, maybe you can give me some advice." So I brought this sweater, and they had a knitting group that day, and they wouldn't accept that I made it. Like, they thought I bought it, because it was like this Fair Isle, like 3-color Nordic thing. And I'm like, "Yeah, here's my first sweater."
What?
I have it up there. I can pull it down in front and show you. It's, if you want to see it,
That is really impressive.
red, white, black Nordic thing. Basically, I saw it at in the Nordic Pavilion at Epcot in Disney. I was like, "Ooh, that's good. I ain't paying $200 for it. I can make that for like 20." So I decided to knit, and so I could make that for myself. That's all. And then I started putting patterns up on Ravelry because I had already written them down. So I was like, "Yeah, why not? I'll put them there." And then every now and then, cha-ching, someone buys one. I'm like, "Yay!"
Awesome.
That's pretty much the entire knitting career right there. That's all there
I
is
wish
to it.
they had
It's
gotten
not
like that for
terribly
me.
How did your career get started there, Amy?
I think I learned crochet from my grandmother, and my mom tried to teach me how to knit, and I was like, "Psh, you can only knit scarves with that. Why would you ever want to do that?" And then crochet started to hurt my hand because it's just like a lot of repetitive, I don't know. I think there's a different way to hold things that people get it, but for me, it doesn't work. And my mom finally dropped this pattern for like a bomber hat in my lap, and she was like, "Look, you can make circles with knitting. You just have to do things correctly." And I was like, "Fine." And that was sort of what started it. I made that hat and just sort of took off running. And I also have some patterns for sale on Ravelry, and actually got a pattern published in Interweave Knits this summer, which was kind of mind-blowing. But yeah, it mostly just keeps my brain from wandering, to take a Beatles lyric. See what I did there?
And full circle.
Right. Because that's something that's a little bit hard with a creative brain, is I constantly am thinking of other stuff. And so at work, it's very hard for me to focus on what people are saying, in part because people talk slowly or they won't get to the point fast enough for my brain to catch up with them. And so I'm already off over here thinking about what I'm going to do later tonight, or what I'm going to put on the sewing machine, or some sort of song or whatever. So knitting is actually the thing that keeps my brain focused, because it's something that I can do without looking and keeps my hands busy, but prevents my brain from, going off in third directions. So I can sit there and knit and be like, "Are you going to get to the point yet?"
There you go. That's what I was just going to ask. This work from home thing's working really well now. How many scarves do you have knitted there?
I actually unknit more than I knit, because I will do something and then be frustrated with it because it doesn't quite work exactly perfectly, and then I'll take it out because I know I'm not going to wear it if it's not to my specifications. But I actually picked up sewing instead, because my sewing machine is broken, and why not? So I'm sewing instead.
Ah, nice.
Mhm.
So I want to get back to the idea of, we both, you guys are really established. You guys have lots of different ways you're expressing creativity and those sorts of things. When you were getting back into music, and Amy, you started to say people were just pushing instruments into your hand when you were a little kid. I'm just guessing they were kid instruments, or did they just like presume, no, she's got talent here, start using this? And Greg, I have no idea. When did you just start picking up all of these instruments to play? I mean, what was the impetus? Was it that you needed to learn to fill in a gap something needed, or what? Or you just couldn't stop yourself?
I get bored easily. So I think that was a lot of it. It just seemed like a cool thing to do. But no, I got my my first instrument, let me think. If I remember correctly, my first instrument was actually this tiny, like a baritone ukulele thing. I don't even remember where it came from. And that might have actually been my second, now that I'm thinking about it. I think my first instrument was my guitar, acoustic guitar my dad got me. And it was literally as tall as I was. So if I stood up and put the guitar next to me, the neck came up right to about my head. Yeah, so it was like an upright bass for me as a 4-year-old. And I literally learned to play on this, what for me was this ridiculously oversized guitar. And I still have it. And I got a new acoustic about 2 years ago because the original one, for whatever reason, is so old that it actually warped. So like the face of it warped, so the sound hole is like offset. Like and you just and it plays and it sounds fine, but the intonation's off. So if you try to go up the fretboard at all, and it just kind of goes slightly out of tune, just enough to be irritating to me. I can't get it, like for recording anyway, I can't get it dead on. You know, if you're just playing on it, it's fine. But so I got another one, but I still have that first guitar, and it looks brand new, other than the fact that the faceplate is warped for some reason. And then from there, it just kind of led from one thing to another. And then I had like one of those. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's one of those little organs, you know, you turn the switch on, it's got the fan in it, you press the key, it's like, you know. I had one of those things, and it had the little chord buttons on the left you'd hold, and it was like just this terrible toy organ thing. And I wanted I wanted an actual piano, and I was probably about 5. I was like, I want a piano, you know. So my dad, who was always very encouraging of stuff, he found an 1812 upright grand player piano that someone sold for like $100, and he bought the thing and had them deliver it, and all the guts had been taken out of it, so like it wasn't a player piano anymore. Like the doors were there to open where the piano roll would go, but there was no mechanism. But it was an upright grand, and it was just piano. So we put it in there and got it tuned, and I taught myself to play, and just by listening to stuff and picking it out and emulating, and and I had a little knowledge from reading the books that I had as a kid for the organ stuff. But I didn't take lessons until I was probably, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 11. I took like a year of lessons, classically trained, and then of course then I got bored and hated it, so I just stopped. And then like a year later, I took 6 months of lessons again, and then I got bored and I stopped. So that's just kind of the way I always operated. And my dad was always very good. He's like, look, let him do it in his own way. Don't force him to do something. Don't force him to take lessons. When he's ready, he'll ask for them. And that's that's kind of what I did until I was in high school. And then my music director in high school, who was a pianist as well, he was like, all right, he needs to learn what he's doing the right way, break these bad habits. So he started giving lessons. That's when I really started seriously taking lessons. And that lasted maybe like 3 years. Then I went off to Berkeley, and you're required to go under an instrument. So I went for piano. And the first year and a half or so, you're required to take lessons. So I took lessons. And the second that was done and I met the minimum requirements, I stopped taking lessons. And that was the last time I took a lesson on my instrument. And I spent the rest of the time in the studios playing with microphones and miking drums and, just recording stuff and doing whatever. But so, I always had this fascination with different musical instruments. And I just I'd hear one, like, that's cool, I want to play that. I was like, ooh, that French horn is awesome. I'm gonna learn to play that. So, I borrowed a French horn and figured out how to play it, and read, one of those like little lesson books that you can get, like Mel Bay guitar book or whatever, and they have a whole series of the typical school ones. Like, you know what they look like, like level 1 has got the red band on the top and level 2's blue or whatever. Yeah, so like I'd get one of those and then learn an instrument. And then, get bored with it and like, ooh, that one looks cool. Let me learn to play oboe now. The same thing, just repeat. And that's just kind of how I picked them up.
Amy, did you get professional lessons?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that there's an interesting difference between the people I tend to see who like actually stick with music, or the ones who stay passionate about it. So I was, I think I started taking lessons in violin at about 9, but singing was something that just sort of came naturally to me that I would just do around the house. So I've never actually taken much in the way of official singing lessons, but did like choir and all that sort of a thing through high school. But violin lessons I took from 9 through about 18 and was made to practice all the time. Not quite as bad as some parents. I know a couple of kids who were like practicing 2 or 3 hours a day, and I was like, what? That's crazy. But I like it enough that I stick with it, and I think I got enough lessons to be like dangerous with violin and just sort of dabble the rest of the time. But yeah, with the rest of the instruments that I pick up, it's mostly like I see somebody playing it and I'm like, I need that in my hands. Like I'm currently obsessed with hurdy-gurdy, and they're a little bit too expensive to just like drop everything and go get one, but they're so cool.
I have to admit, I don't even know what that is.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so a hurdy-gurdy is basically a violin-ish. So it's got strings and it doesn't have frets, but it sort of has piano keys that hit down on the
Oh, okay.
strings. And then to play the notes, there is a wooden wheel.
With a crank.
Yeah, with the crank. And the
I didn't
wheel,
know. I've seen those. Yeah.
yeah, you rosin the wheel just like you would a bow, and you put a little bit of cotton on the strings, not the, yes, there's the hurdy-gurdy. And so you crank it to make the tone, and then you use the piano key things to change the notes. And then they have drone strings that are either always on or always off. And then they have a floating bridge in there so that when you go fast enough, it starts making its own rhythm section as well. And it is super, super cool. Who's the guy that I'm following? There's a Russian guy named Andrei. I can't remember exactly the rest of his name. And then there's two guys who are really, really good at it that I've been following, and I just sort of drool on their music. It's even cooler when they put some reverb behind it and mic it up, and then one of them uses a looper. So he layers a bunch of music on top of itself. I'm a little bit, yeah, that guy on the first one is the one I was talking about. I think the other one's named Guillaume, so French. Yeah, I really like the aspect of looping musicians. Those are the people who are always fascinate me a lot because they're sort of like their own one-person band and they stick stuff all on top of each other. So that's sort of the direction that I was trying to head when I was playing with my own music. I have some MIDI controllers that I can do some looping things with, and I was playing with Ableton for a little bit. And yeah, mostly I just need to get back into dabbling.
So that leads me to one of our questions we always try to make sure we ask is, what's the one thing you're proudest or happiest about that you created and why? What is the one thing that you really get off that really makes you, makes your heart grow 3 sizes too big, Amy?
In college, I played. Actually, in between college and high school, I was doing for free busking at the Renaissance Festival in Colorado. And I met up with a group of people who were doing sort of like Irish pub shanty music sort of things and got in with them. And we sort of started a band together and didn't do too much touring, but tried to do a couple of bar gigs here and there. And during one of our practice sessions, I was just dinking around and ended up creating a whole like full-length fiddle tune, and the whole band got in on like helping me make that, and we created a whole long song out of it. And it's super fun to perform because I start out with it in one tempo and then sort of pause and everyone's like, oh, that was nice, haha, it's over. And then the drummer comes in and like sets the tempo to double time, and then I do it on double time and everyone's like, oh my gosh, she's doing it faster. And it's just so cool to perform live. Everybody gets up and dances, and I'm really proud of that because it's like one of the things that I actually composed start to finish and got to work in an arrangement of people and have performed for actual humans and got that like feedback response of people enjoying my music. Yeah. So I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of.
How about you, Greg?
That's kind of like asking someone like, which is their favorite kid, I guess.
Yeah, we won't tell.
I was the oldest of 5. I know exactly who was the favorite. So come on.
And as you know, then the answer to the question is they all disgust me, and they're all horrible kids, and I'm not proud of any of them. So I don't really know. I seriously don't really know. I mean, I can think of a lot of things that I've done in the past, but nothing really jumps out as being particularly unusual or good or something to be proud of. And I think it's because, I don't know, my brain doesn't really think of it that way. I just do whatever interests me at the moment. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then I'm on to the next thing. If I have a major flaw, it's like, that's good enough. On to the next thing. Like, it's like about 2 years ago, I decided I'm going to learn to play Irish fiddle. So I went out and bought a nice violin, and I got the things, and I have friends at the pub, and they're like, all right, give me some names of stuff. And I like could play like 2 tunes. I'm like, okay, I can play Irish fiddle. That's good enough. And then I haven't touched it since, So it's like, all right, I did it. Now it's the next thing. But I'm very much scattered like that. It's, and it's not just music. Like literally, it's like, today, you know what I really need to do? I really need to build a wind farm for the house. I'm going to go and build like a wind turbine. And then it's like, oh, no, wait, shit, I need to rebuild the carburetor. See, I told you someone was going to curse during the show, and it was me. I told you. You're going to have to edit that out if this goes live anywhere. Or just put it in because, we don't care. But, so now I'm like rebuilding a motorcycle because it's like, oh, someone has to do it. So I'm going to go learn how to do it. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a mechanic. But I'm like, how hard can it be? I'll just take every piece off and clean it and put it back together. Yeah, YouTube, exactly. Like, what do we do without the internet? Like, yeah,
we built pyramids and
yeah, exactly. Just played with stones. That's pretty much it. But yeah, so I mean, I can't really say there's anything that I'm particularly proud of. Even the fact that I'm now getting attacked by a cat who's directly behind me.
Yeah, we saw his little head poke over before, right?
Yeah. Because he's being a pain. He's starved for attention.
There we go.
But yeah, so I can't really say anything. I've done a lot of different things. I think if I had to pick something, and it's not even that I'm particularly proud of it, it's just kind of cool, is one project I did audio post-production and production work on a TV show, and I won an Emmy for it. So that was kind of cool.
Well, that's a definite thing. Yeah, Emmys definitely count.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of a cool, like, conversation piece. It's pretty much all it's good for. By the way, that's it. Everyone's always makes it. It's like, I literally have a friend who I'm not going to give you his name, but he literally has a box of Grammys. And when I say a box of Grammys, it's a cardboard box, and he just puts them in there, and they're just piled like at a rummage sale, and he keeps them in his closet. And when he was moving, I'm like, what the hell is this? And he's like, oh, those are my Grammys. And so it's a cardboard box of Grammys. And so, like, I was like, oh, it's a Grammy. Oh, it's and you're like, yeah, you have no idea. It's basically just like, oh, yeah, that's good. Here, we'll recognize you for now. And in a week, no one cares. So, but it's fun.
I think it's the big names, the ones that usually get talked about a lot. Because I know another person who has like an Emmy or a Grammy or something. And it's actually because her company did a thing that produced a thing that did a thing, and they just all got the statue.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's basically, I call them, it's basically the professional entertainment industry version of that blue field day ribbon you get in elementary school as a kid. It's like, you completed the 100-yard dash. Here's your blue ribbon. And it's like, yay, I got my ribbon, It's kind of the same thing. Except
anymore.
Okay, now that we'll have the award ceremonies coming down to talk to us soon, I'm certain about that. Okay.
We shattered all your illusions in the industries.
Yeah. So I do. Speaking of that, though, thanks for that segue there, Greg. My next question was, what do you think? We know pretty much this, society thinks of musicians a certain way. Talk about that stereotypical, maybe the wrong view of what a musician is or isn't, and what do you think happens to you when you're talking to people about that kind of stuff? Like, if you just go to tell someone, well, I'm playing a Beatles band.
It's all lies, and it's all true simultaneously. It's basically, I mean, every stereotype you hear about musicians is completely not true, except for those 2 musicians that and it's 100% true for them. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is; it's all true. Basically, stereotypes always come about for a reason. It doesn't matter what, not just musicians, anything in life. Stereotypes exist for a reason. Someone saw something that was doing exactly that stereotype and then just decided that's what that group does, whether it's a group of people or musicians or artists or what, it doesn't matter. And that's just what happens. And so, like, there's always a nugget of truth somewhere in them. But at the same time, it's all complete nonsense. It's not true. That's not a musician thing. It's just that particular musician or that particular artist or whatever, because everyone's so different. But it's like, I think it's probably the same in any art form, really. I mean, I'm not much of a visual artist. I've dabbled and, played with stuff here and there just to see. And I've just come to terms that if I draw a character, it looks like it was mangled in a bizarre gardening accident, is pretty much. So that's my level of visual artism. I have a friend of mine who everything he does, I'm constantly like, where'd you get this from? Like, I can't even draw a stick figure without looking like it should be in the hospital. So, but he just like comes up with this photorealistic stuff and it just makes me disgusted, but I know it's the same in anything else. He spent years doing this, and I just don't have the patience apparently to learn to do something like that. It's just, I'm very lazy is what it is. So if I have a knack for something, I'll do it. If I have to work hard to be halfway decent at it, I usually give up long before I get to that point. And that's just me.
So I'm thinking Greg breaks that common conception that you're the musician who's slaved for hours and hours and hours to do something. Greg's just like, oh no, he just picks it up, does it, and he walks off with it. Amy, how about you? What do you think that misconception is about music or stereotype that you think about? Or is there something that people think of you when they find out from your coding world that you're a musician? Do they automatically presume something about you?
I don't know if they necessarily presume something about me, but it does tend to, I feel like software development tends to overlap heavily with creatives in general. We tend to have a pretty large group of people who are musical or artsy or that sort of a thing in general.
We did a whole coding one month.
Nice. I'm gonna have to go look that up. But I feel like too many people think of music as just talent. And while there are people who can, just pick things up and sort of run with it, I think it's a lot more is with the interest and the time. There's a lot of time we spend in doing this music sort of thing. Like I've been playing the violin for 20 something odd years. So if somebody, or even just with knitting, like a lot of people will see my sweaters and be like, wow, that's crazy. I could never do that. I'm like, I have been knitting for 22 years. That's a lot of practice that you don't have. So yes, you could do this. It just might take you a while. And I really like to remind people that because I don't like the idea that somebody gets when they see somebody who's good at something and then they just automatically think I could never be that good. Like maybe you won't be that good, but if you take the time and you're interested in it enough and you put that effort into it, you could go somewhere with it.
Yeah.
It's just all up to your interest level.
I have a few mottos that I live by. One of my favorites for me personally has always been very simple. It's like, for one, anytime you do anything weird and that people are uncomfortable with, they're just going to blame it on the fact that you're a musician, which I'm totally cool with. I use that as like my go-to barrier. I'm like, sorry, I'm just a musician. And that's all I have to say. And then people are like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. And then they just accept it. So they can get away with pretty much anything. But my other thing that I tell people a lot is I figured out very, very early on where my weaknesses are and where my strengths were and how to play to my strengths and diminish my weakness. So pretty much my entire professional musical career has been avoiding things that I suck at so that people think I'm better than I actually am. And that's the game. That's what being a professional musician is really all about, is you just have to make people think you're actually better at something than you really are. And if you know your instrument well enough to know, I shouldn't play that in front of anybody because I'm going to screw it up. And you only play the stuff that you know you can do flawlessly. People just assume you're perfect at everything. And it's the entertainment industry. It's an illusion. It's all lies. The whole industry.
Can confirm. I cannot play a Bach partita straight through.
Well, I guarantee you're probably way more precise in your instrumentation than I am on any of mine.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, great. If you're keeping to those exact beats and notes from somebody else's recorded on, you got to be doing something right, correct?
I don't know if I'd say I'm doing it right. I've just learned how to memorize things. I'll tell you a funny story.
That's a talent.
I taught myself to play the bass for that show because we needed a bass player, for obviously to do the McCartney stuff. And so I actually don't really know the bass as an instrument at all. Like, so people keep making a mistake of saying, oh, no, that note should be an E flat. I'm like, tell me which string and which fret. I have no idea where an E flat is on the bass. I mean, I know the open strings, but it's like, I just there was a guitar meme I just found the other day that I just sent to my bandmates, which they thought was funny. And it was a photo of a guitar neck. And it had a little bracket around the first 3 frets. And it said C, F, G, D, A, E. And then from like fret 4 down to the end of the neck, there was another long bracket, and it said, I have no idea what any of this craziness is. That's me.
Nice.
To a T, that is me. And that's how I had the bass. So I literally had when we would do the show when we first started 10 years ago now, on the set list, I put numbers next to every song. So it would be like the name of the song, and it would say like 4/7. And the next song is like 3/5. And people are like, finally, the guys, well, what is this? I'm like, oh, the first number is which string, and the second number is which fret. Once I know where to put my finger to start, I just memorize the pattern and go from there. I don't know what notes that I'm actually playing. I just know, well, this is the pattern. So if I lose my place, you can imagine what a train wreck that is, because I can't just pick up from where I left off. I have to wait until the start of the next section. So it's like, turn the bass on and say, oh, something's wrong with my power. Let me,
Oh.
they're just coming up. Here we go. Turn it back on. Okay, now I'm fine. That's what you do. It's really not my instrument. My instrument is piano, so, but yeah, I've learned all kinds of tricks like that to just kind of fake my way through stuff, but it works, and people, and the end result is no one knows the difference because they hear what they expect to hear and they say, oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Like, good. I fooled you.
And you're singing at a bar, and well, actually, you don't do very many bar bands, do you? You said.
No, not really. We honestly, in the past few years, like there was like 2. One of them's a bar, and it's only because the owner was a friend of my one of my guitarists, and so we would play there because it was a really cool place, and it was one night a month, and every time it was packed, wall-to-wall people. We knew everybody was there. It was the same people would come out all the time, so it was kind of fun because it was like being in a party. And at the same time, I hated it because it was one of those bar gigs that's like, oh, you're going to play like 8 till midnight. And it was up in, Central Florida. And so I'd get home at 4 a.m. And those days are long gone for me. Like I'm in bed at like 10:30. It's like, okay, it's bedtime. So the whole next day I felt hungover, and I wouldn't even drink anything. It just schedule shifts kill me. I just can't do it. So I kind of loved that gig and hated it. But everything else we do is like theater shows. So those are great because it's instead of 4 hours, it's 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours with an intermission if they wanted a long format show. And then it starts at like 7 or 7:30, and I'm home by like 10 o'clock. So I'm like, and it pays like 4 times as much. So
Yeah.
that's the only way to go. So I've been kind of phasing out anything that's not a theater gig, much to the chagrin of my bandmates who just want to play all the time. And so I take these gigs, I'm like, I do not want to go and spend an entire night and get home at 4 a.m. for like, $200, like, no, pay me $1,000 and I'll do it. I'm not for $200. It's not worth it to me anymore. I just can't take it. My body can't take this, so it's just a different thing. So that's why we do like a show band. If we did, a mix of all kinds of music, we wouldn't be playing the theaters. It's just we do it because it's a very niche show that is, quite honestly, I picked because it was easy to sell. I mean, most people like the Beatles, or at least them, or like the Stones, I guess. But it's like one of the 2 camps. So it was an easy sell. So I figured, okay, I like the music, I like their stuff, I know their music, and it should be easy to sell and book. And that's why we ended up doing it, quite honestly.
Do you think that that kind of startup is still a necessity for musicians who are coming up, like booking yourself at weird hours completely across the state just so that you can get in front of people? Or would you say that that's less of a problem nowadays with all of the networking kind of things that you can do on the internet?
That's a good question. I would say it kind of depends and varies on what the goals are. If you're performing original music, you've got to get out in front of people and develop an audience, right? They want to see you. And then because there's a connection and a bond there, it's like once they've seen you play live, you know, they always want to come up and talk with you and so then it's like now oh, you have a CD, let me buy your CD. Oh, okay, and I got the CD. Oh, now I'm going to play this for my friends. I'm going to bring them to the next show. So it becomes this kind of, it is like a social networking, but it only seems to happen with live performance. Like that's what happens. Like, you know, I'll put up a social media page and after 10 years, maybe I get 3 people who will email me about something. And it's always, hey, when are you going to be playing over in this area? And that's always what it is. So, but when there's live, it's like everyone wants, if you've played a bar, you know, it's like, you know, the guy who's going to come up and, you know, yell questions in your face mid-song, you know, and you're like,
while you've got your
head
head on the violin.
Yeah, you know, my head's got this, and he's trying to yell in your ear, you know, standing over you because your head's tilted or something, you know. And there's always that, and that's just what people do. They want to be involved. So, you know, if you're, you know, pitching your own music, I would think it's important. If you're doing a show like we do, which is we're just playing the music of an established group, to a certain degree, the genre of the music that we're doing, it kind of sells itself. You know, just to give you an idea, and maybe this will illustrate the point. So we did a show on a community theater show on the west coast of Florida. And we get there to do the show, we set up and everything else. And we go through and we look in the lobby and they have a poster announcing our show. And it's got the name of our band and this. And it's got a poster of these 4 random people like in Beatles wigs and suits with their instruments. And I'm like, who the hell are these guys? Like, what is this? And so apparently what happened was when they booked the show, the person in charge of the theater told their assistant, hey, download the graphics and stuff and just put together a poster. Well, so they had our graphics and things, and then they just Googled Beatles band and grabbed the first photo they found and put that on the poster. So there's this big poster with our name and these like 4 17-year-old gangly looking kids in horrible
I want to know that you autographed that poster and kept it.
We actually asked if we could have it, and they were going to give it to us, but I think that my drummer left it there or something because we don't actually have it. But somewhere I do have a picture of the poster. We took pictures of the poster, and I think we can put it up on our Facebook page. Like, apparently this is us now, you know. And but that's how generic it is because people are coming to see that music. They're not coming to see us. They're coming to see that music. We did a show this past weekend, and it was great. After the show, and this is my favorite, the woman comes up just like, oh, my God, that was so amazing. You guys were fantastic. It's the best show. But, you know, I knew you were going to be good because my friend just saw you at XYZ venue last week. We weren't there. That was not us. So they went and saw some other show. And I just said, oh, thank you very much. And that's it. I don't care. You know, the check is going to clear. So that's all I care about. I played the music. They had fun. Check clears. We're happy. You know, but that's Greg, the way it is.
Yeah. You bring up a point that's relevant for these times right now. And Amy, you're not doing music professionally or very much. Are you still playing in the bar?
No, I haven't played.
Or were you in the before times? How about that's where I'm leading towards is were you doing something different in the before times and then now and leading, you know, following up on your previous question, people who could perform live over the internet now for their fans or whatever. And is that a realistic way of people getting feedback? I know it's probably not a good way, as Greg was saying, it's might not be such a great way of building your audience, but is it a good way of getting feedback from your existing audience maybe?
I have thoughts about this. So I haven't actually played with a band or in a bar like for people who came to see me in a while. I was, pardon that, I was playing or performing with the symphony just in choir. So for that aspect, that has greatly changed because singing is one of those things that transmits virus. So it's going to be the last thing that comes back and I miss it entirely. But as far as the internet goes and maintaining the audience, I have a hard time connecting with musicians via a live performance sort of a thing. I have a lot of musicians that I follow who do and are doing that sort of a thing. They occasionally come in and they say, hey, I'm going to go live. I'm going to play some things randomly. And I usually prefer it if they're just like dinking around because that's the kind of thing that I wouldn't see if I went to a concert, but I haven't really gotten into watching live concerts on the internet because it's just not the same for me. I go to a concert because I want to be there with the huge surround sound system that I can feel through my feet and that I can see them and the lighting and all of that sort of a thing. So from that sort of aspect, I don't know that that's necessarily going to carry me forward as a fan. But I do know a lot of people do appreciate that. So I don't know. It's kind of
I'd say one of my favorite bands, Delta Ray, has been doing that Instagram live thing every Wednesday night. Just here, we're practicing a new song. We're going to make up this. We're going to do this, and it's been a really good thing to see the background stuff, like you said.
yeah,
that's been
background
fun
is
like
really
that.
interesting.
How
I
about you, Greg?
follow. I'm sorry.
No, I want to hear that follow up in just a second there, Amy. But Greg, since you were doing like live real bands, so you basically had to take a year off.
Yeah, basically, last February, we did our last show last February, just as things were starting to kind of ramp up and get a little crazy. And we said, we had 2 shows that were there, and they said, we're not sure. We think we may have to cancel the shows. And I said, that's not a problem. Cancel the shows, whatever. They canceled, and I said, all right, we're done for now. We're just going to hang out and wait and see what happens because, I mean, let's be honest. As a species, we're not exactly the smartest group. So I figured it was going to be bad for a while. So fortunately, I mean, I have other streams of income. I have other things that I can do. I've done some coding stuff. I have a software project that I'm working on that's generating money now. And I have, as a producer, I can do other things. I do film and television work as well. So, I have my, enough projects going on that I can, piece together a decent living even without playing. The playing was kind of playing out was really the fun part, just like, all right, let's go play some music because I got an itch and I said, I haven't played out in a while. I want to do this. But, I think a lot of people do like to come out and see the live shows. And I say that simply that now that things are opening back up, I got 4 calls yesterday to book 4 different shows. And, so that's a good problem to have, and so we're only doing outdoor shows. I added a clause to the contract says everything must meet CDC guidelines. The outside, the band must be kept separate from the audience, knowing very well that inevitably the audience people are going to come up. But I'd rather have 1 or 2 random people come up to talk to us or whatever than get swamped and have the entire audience 2 feet in front of the stage, So, we put it in there. And so far we've only been doing outdoor shows and they've all been well attended and respectful. Everyone was separate and, keeping their distance, had masks and everything else. So haven't had any problems, which is good. But we just started doing that. I think our first show was like in February, end of February or beginning of March this year was the first show we've done since last February.
And Amy, you were about to say also.
I was going to say that something that is interesting that came of the pandemic times is because I've been home so much and have actual time. My band members actually want to re-record the album that we recorded originally several years ago and is crappy. And this has actually been a really interesting opportunity for us because we're all just stuck at home. And so we've actually been starting to do a couple of little meetings and we're trying to get that music and record it and make it like actually sound good with click tracks and that sort of thing. Because we did a lot of sort of hybrid live, not quite live, and it's really sloppy and we're not super proud of that CD. So the fact that there's time and I can't do any other music anywhere else has given me that opportunity that I probably wouldn't have done if it was the before times.
Yeah. And you're up in the Northwest. So down here in South Florida, we're a bit looser on things and like Greg was saying, performing outside. And I know you were, as we were just saying, singing is the key thing for, how many hotspots did we have last year from the various choruses and church choirs? What's the prospects for you up there on that?
So the choir itself has been doing weekly Zoom choir practice, but we don't actually sing because it's impossible. You cannot do
you can't be
an
in sync.
practice via, no, it's just not possible. So what they have been doing, and I haven't been participating because it just doesn't work with the way I want. I'm in the choir because I like the feeling of people around me harmonizing and singing with them. But what they've been doing is we've been trying to keep up our voices by recording ourselves, and then the choir director will put it together and then play it back for us. We're not actually sharing it with anybody. It's mostly just to keep voices up. But as far as prospects after that goes, the symphony itself seems like it's been able to stay afloat with donor money, and they've been putting past performances online and that sort of a thing. So it is looking like that's going to at some point start up, but I think the CDC guidelines for singing now were like 7 people in a football field, spaced, you know, every several yard lines, that kind of a thing for singing guidelines. So it's gonna be quite a while until we can actually get back in together. But with vaccination, that might actually go a little bit faster. We'll see.
We're hopeful. I'm hopeful for that. Yeah, I did.
I really miss music live.
Yeah, I did church choirs and high school chorus. I was in 4 at once at one point in my senior year where I was just going crazy. So yeah, I know that singing bug that just keeps on going and going and going. So last thing for us here is we've just flown by a full hour here already. What is the advice you want to give someone for how they should be tackling this going forward? You know, between now as we're coming out of this, and I'm personally not guessing we just flip a switch and go back to whatever. My saying around the library here is we're not going to normal, we're going to better. So what do you guys see as better for the music industry or for your own personal music stuff in particular going forward after we've had this huge layoff of a year?
Greg, you should go first.
Yeah, I should, but I don't know what to say about that.
Same.
It's a tough question because human history of thousands and thousands of years of art and music, it really hasn't changed. We have different instruments or different styles of music, but the core concepts are pretty much the same. So there's really not much you can do differently. You've got live performance, you've got in the modern era, you've got recording. And those are basically your 2 outlets. Pick one. You have the hybrids now. Like I said, people doing things online, live concerts online. I don't really do that so much, though. If I'm going to watch a live concert online, it's going to be a live concert that was recorded, and I'm watching it on an 80-inch screen with surround sound and cranked up, so at least it kind of simulates being there, versus just kind of getting on my computer and watching it. I just never do that at all. So I don't know, really. It's really just going to be a matter of a waiting game and balance and being able to do what you can while balancing the issues that need to be addressed to keep people safe until such time as we can get out of the get out from under the thumb of the pandemic thing and get to the point where enough people are vaccinated and there's herd immunity and all the other things so that we can actually just get back out there and kind of return to a somewhat normal concert venue. And there really isn't any other option. Right now we're just doing, like I said, outdoor venues. Like we've all been vaccinated, so everyone in our show, we all got both doses of the shots and everyone's fine. So we're like, okay, it's not 100%, there's still a risk, but that's good enough for me to at least be a semblance of normal. So my thing is, look, we're going to enforce the guidelines, keep separation, keep it as much as possible. I'm comfortable being around the other guys in the band. We share a stage, we're about 6 feet apart, maybe, but we don't have masks when we're singing, and we can't, but we know each other. We've all been very conscious about, I stay home most of the time. I have saved so much money because in the before times, my dining out budget exceeded the GDP of several small nations. So I'm like, now I just sit at home and cook, and I'm like, I have saved a ton of money. And I'm like, this is not a bad thing. Maybe I'm going to stay like this and not go back to the before times, So, so at least, knowing who I'm around and stuff, we're comfortable with each other. And we just try to make sure that we can do a good show for an audience in a live setting outdoors where we keep enough distance and they're not, endangering each other. And, limited audiences. And that's what we do, and that's really all we can do right now. So we do it. And that's only recent. Only the past month or so have we started doing these shows. Prior to that, people would call us and we're like, no. We get
this sounds a lot like going back to quartets in the park or in the garden of, here let's go do this. And we've only got the 12 people here and you're going to come perform for us. And it all comes back around again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy? What do you think?
Um, I think that the internet things that people are playing with are going to stick around as far as leveraging people's fan bases. And from the aspect of workshops, I think it's really working well for some musicians. I'm in a Scottish Fiddlers Guild or whatever here, and they've actually been able to get more teachers than they have ever been before because they don't have to fly them out. So with it is nicer if you can actually play your fiddle with everybody and hear everybody playing, but from the aspect of person plays a song, you keep yourself on mute and you're just playing in your own house and learning alongside them. That's working really, really great because I've been able to, we had a person who was in Quebec teaching Quebecois fiddling, and we had people attending from Japan and France and Seattle and all sorts of places. And so this person gets to broaden her audience and also income stream because we all tipped her.
Nice.
And it also expands the reach to other people. So somebody in France who's like, I don't know anything about Saskatchewan, can learn from that person who learned from all of these other people. So I think that's really broadening the music industry because you can actually share it even more widely with less expense. So it's sort of like bringing down that entry cap.
Yeah. Ease of
I'm looking
access
forward to
to the
that.
field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think the tools that we have been forced to develop to acquire a semblance of normality over this past year are definitely here to stay.
Mhm.
And that's, I think that's a good thing. If you want to pick a silver lining out of all this, there's definitely collaborative tools now that are available that weren't a year ago or a year and a half ago. So it definitely will be interesting to see how that continues. And I'm a big fan of it. I love it. I mean, we have instant communication anywhere in the world. We have for years, but most people never really used it. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh yes, let's do this conference call with people in Japan, in Tokyo, and this. And so people have gotten comfortable using the tools that have been around for a while, but weren't very popular. And it's become somewhat normalized. And that's a good thing from that standpoint, I think, anyway. It'll be interesting.
It will definitely be an interesting new world, I think. Well, thank you guys both very much for being here. I'm going to throw up your websites up on the screen real quick for everybody to see, and these will be in the notes if you come back and view the page, the recording page. For everybody who's in the audience, you automatically get a recording sent to you, and if not, this will be up later on. Here's Amy's page out there, amygleixner.com, Gleixner. And here's Across the Universe, the ultimate experience for the Beatles from Greg's band. Thank you guys both again so much for being here for this. And I think this is really a lot of fun. This is
Thanks for
definitely
having
going
us.
on. Let me throw up our final title slide here. Again, Creation Station Monthly. If you have any questions or things you wanted me to get off to our guests, creationstation@broward.org. And of course, tune in next month. We are looking at performers next month, and we'll talk about the difference between what a musician is and what a performer is. Thank you all very much for being with us this month. Have a great day.